Hello and welcome to Criminal Record, the Daily Record's weekly crime show. My name is Angus Hyde, and today I am joined by Norman Silvester, crime reporter with the Daily Record. Norman, how you doing?
Good to see you, Angus.
Today we'll be looking at the latest dramatic developments in the world of organised crime. Norman, I understand there's been a major crime figure with links to Jamie the Iceman Stevenson, who was jailed for 6 years last week. For those who don't know, who is Jamie Iceman Stevenson?
Well, first of all, for those regular listeners and readers' Daily Record, they'll be familiar with Jamie Stevenson, nicknamed the Iceman. For those who are not so familiar, he's a major organised crime figure and has been in Scotland for the last 20 years or so. Stevenson's currently serving a 16-year sentence following his conviction at the High Court in Glasgow in October 2024. He'd been arrested and been in custody for a number of years awaiting trial, and had been detained by and arrested by police for his involvement in organised crime, and in particular, a £100 million consignment of cocaine, which had been trafficked from Ecuador and had been stopped at a port in the south of England, and had been destined for Glasgow. He was sentenced to 16 years for that, reduced from 20 on appeal. And Jamie Stevenson previously served a 12.5-year sentence, or been sentenced 12.5 years, 2007, for his involvement in organised crime. So we know Jamie Stevenson, his nickname is Iceman, is a major international global crime figure involved in organised crime. Though he's originally from Scotland, he'd made international connections, as quite a number of our major crime figures have, and he'd been a major target for the police, as I say, currently serving a 16-year sentence. We're going to talk about a guy called Stephen Jamieson. Now, Stephen Jamieson was close associate of Jamie Stevenson. Stephen Jamieson is another major organised crime figure who's been under the police radar for the last 20 years or so. He appeared at the High Court in Glasgow last week, pled guilty to being involved in trafficking large consignments of cocaine, heroin, and a kind of street drug called Itisalam. It's Class C, but it's a kind of prescription drug that's quite often abused, and it's highly addictive and makes a lot of money for people involved in organised crime. Now, the interesting thing about Jamieson, he's a 43-year-old. Jamieson pled guilty to the offences, was given six years, reduced from 9 years because of the guilty plea. The allegations against him in relation to the drugs trafficking was on a 54-day period in 2020. Now, around about that time, the French police cracked a sort of secret encrypted mobile phone messaging service called EncroChat that about 60,000 people worldwide have been using, particularly criminals, because it enabled basically criminals to communicate with each other, message each other, and do their business, such as drug dealing. So the policeman, or the French police, had cracked this code, passed the names on to the Scottish police, and one of them was Stephen Jamieson. Stephen Jamieson then became a target for the police. By this time, he was living in Dubai, as a number of major crime figures had moved there in recent years. He'd been living in Dubai since 2013. There was a warrant issued for his arrest in December 2023. There was various kind of comings and goings, and he was eventually arrested by the Dubai authorities in United Arab Emirates in July last summer, and eventually he was agreed to be extradited back to Scotland and was flown back to Scotland in December this year, subsequently appeared at the High Court in Glasgow. So it's an interesting one. Stephen Jamieson is one of these individuals who appears to have enjoyed a lavish lifestyle. He'd been based in Dubai since about 2013. He enjoyed, as it came out during the trial, he enjoyed traveling to Dubai, Barcelona, buying watches. He bought a £146,000 Jeep, from his life of crime. He'd become close friends with Jamie Stevenson. They became business partners, effectively criminal associates. They'd met in prison. while they were both serving prison sentences. I'll come to that in a minute. And they'd, prior to the arrest, they enjoyed holidays together in Dubai and Barcelona, and were very close. Probably Stevenson's closest ally, two people that kind of trusted each other and worked in tandem with each other.
So this is a pretty significant coup in getting him tied down.
It's a major coup for the police. It's a joint operation between Police Scotland, the National Crime Agency, which is kind of Britain's FBI, and the police authorities in Dubai. And it was quite interesting that there was various comments issued by these three bodies, and one of them, Sinead Collins from the Crown Office, talked about him being a significant figure in Scotland's serious organised crime landscape. So we're not talking about some kind of middle of the road drug dealer. We're talking about a guy right at the top of the tree. This is a major, it's usually a major coup for the police. You know, it's a major crime figure. It's often said, you know, that the police get the street dealers or the middle ranking guys. But what we've seen in recent years, following this cracking of this EncroChat, is that it's given them a kind of treasure trove of information, very damning information on people like Jamie Stevenson. Also, we talk about Stephen Jamieson and others, which we've talked about in the past. I'm just going to refer back, interesting enough, to when Jamieson, his last appearance in court was in the High Court Glasgow, was in October 2009, and he was jailed for 8 years. And it was during this prison sentence, I believe, that he got to know and became friends with Jamie Stevenson. And that at the time was the biggest organised crime investigation ever launched by police. It was over 15 months. Then Strathclyde Police, involving over 100 officers. They seized £9 million worth of drugs, machine guns, other weapons, 7 luxury cars, and £500,000 in cash. So that was already Stephen Jamieson. We're talking about the best part 20 years ago, has already been a kind of identified, he'd been involved in organised crime. And the interesting thing, which we've talked about in the past, is just kind of showing the money to be made. Then it was heard that Stevens had used the profits to buy a £115,000 Lamborghini and a puppy dog for £1,800. And they heard stories about individual members of the gang were making something like £20,000 a day from drugs, and the people that they were supplying to further down the chain were making anything between £500,000 and £800,000 from drugs. So it goes to show, maybe we try to emphasise it, and we say, well, why do so many people get involved in organised crime when the police seem to be so good at bringing those to justice? I think it's the money there, the lavish lifestyle to be enjoyed.
Money talks.
Money talks. And though we've seen a lot of people, obviously the Iceman, we've seen Jamieson now in prison, there's plenty of other people willing to take their place.
Yeah, and of course this will be an ongoing problem for police, obviously across the world, but especially when these voids open, someone steps in. It'll be a...
Well, that's the thing we'll come to. I mean, the Iceman, Jamieson, was known as a kind of Tony Soprano. He was a kind of real life Tony Soprano. And these guys go to prison, but they come out eventually. A lot of the guys that we've written about and talked about recently, we know that they continue to run their operations from prison. We know that they've got money sitting in the bank somewhere when they come out, and a lot of them just seem to go back into that organised crime lifestyle. The prison sentences, though, are quite hefty, don't seem to be a deterrent.
Yeah, of course. And moving on, the Daily Record has been highlighting the unsolved murder of Alistair Wilson for a number of years now. And last week we reported on a fallout between the police and the family. Obviously quite an upsetting one for the family. Tell us a wee bit more about that.
Yeah, this is an interesting case. We've highlighted in the Daily Record over the last 20 years the unsolved murder of Alistair Wilson. Alistair was a bankman or business manager with the Bank of Scotland. One Sunday night in late November 2004, a man came to the door and shot him dead. His wife had answered the door earlier, and he'd come at the door. The gunman had handed him an envelope. Alistair had gone in back to speak to his wife. They didn't seem to understand what was happening. He's come back out to speak to the man at the door, and he's been shot dead. The gunman has just walked off. The weapon used to kill Alistair was later found, but 10 days later, in a drain by sort of council staff that were cleaning the drain. So this is one of Scotland's most baffling unsolved murders. Alistair was a business manager with the Bank of Scotland. He had 2 young children, and he was happily married, lived in a nice house in the seaside town of Nairn, was due to start a new job in Inverness. And then this seems to be a completely motiveless murder. The police kind of looked at his financial background, but there was nothing in his job to suggest he'd been targeted. And then it was suggested it could be linked to a dispute he had with a neighbouring hotel. They'd put up some decking without the necessary planning permission. They'd applied for retrospective planning permission, that had been refused. But that seems in itself maybe a strange motive for the murder. And to this day, it remains unsolved. We don't know who the mystery man was at the door, and nobody's ever been charged or arrested. There was, in the past, the Wilson family have been very cooperative with the police, not really said much. But in September 2024, the Lord Advocate announced a reinvestigation. The family, a root and branch reinvestigation of the crime, which is ongoing just now. But the family have, in the last couple of years, expressed concerns and dissatisfaction with elements of the investigation. And they've got a number of ongoing complaints against Police Scotland senior officers and also other bodies. And this particular one that I'm talking about was a complaint made by the family, the widow, Alistair's wife Veronica, and his son Andrew, who's now grown up, now 26. And they complained, they'd been told that there was going to be an arrest of a suspect around about sort of middle of May 2023. That didn't happen. And they had a complaint upheld against a guy called Detective Chief Superintendent Paul Livingston, who's head of crime. And they said they had misled them over the arrest date. That complaint was upheld. Subsequently, our story was about Detective Chief Superintendent Livingston receiving an award for his services to policing, contribution to policing, earlier this month at a ceremony, I believe at the Scottish Police College at Tullyallen. It was a kind of conference for senior investigating officers, and the family complained, said they're unhappy at him getting this award, given that they've had this previous complaint upheld against him. So it's a sad one, you know, that it's a tragic unsolved murder, and it appears as this underlying complaint by the family, Alistair Wilson family, really about the ongoing handling of the case by Police Scotland.
Yeah, and of course, Police Scotland won't want those kind of optics on their own investigations as well. A really difficult one.
It's a difficult one because they obviously want to solve the case. The family, who remained silent for a number of years, have become quite vocal in the last 2.5 years about elements of the investigation. They were particularly concerned, as I said earlier, about they were initially told there would be an arrest, and the arrest was called off. And then they had the complaint upheld against Mr. Livingston that they were misled. So it's a bit sad because at the end of the day, we want to see someone brought to justice, and hopefully the family's complaints can be resolved, and eventually we do see someone stand trial for Alistair's murder.
Yeah, of course, and that is the end goal, of course, getting justice for Alistair. Moving on, last week we got the news of a pretty shocking case where a 30-year-old woman was found guilty of the murder of her 3-week-old daughter. Very disturbing and upsetting case. We'll go through some of the details here, but can you just tell me a wee bit more about Nicole Blain and when she's liable to be sentenced?
Yeah, it's a very disturbing and distressing case. Following a trial at the High Court in Glasgow, Nicole Blain, she's a 30-year-old woman. She was convicted of murdering her 19-day-old baby daughter at their home in Greenock in July 2023. The young baby suffered a string of what was described as catastrophic injuries, including 3 skull fractures, brain damage, and bleeding behind the ears.
I think I saw that it was compared to car crash.
Yeah, that's right. I think the prosecutor compared it to the kind of injuries you see it, in a major car crash. appeared the baby had been violently shaken and repeatedly hit off some kind of hard surface, such as a floor or a wall. Nicole blamed, when she was obviously interviewed by police, blamed another child in the flat, but she was found guilty at the High Court in Glasgow. There was other disturbing evidence where the baby's grandmother talked about being on the phone to Nicole Blain and hearing a terrible piercing scream from the baby and urging her to call an ambulance. As she said, the injuries were compared to a car crash. Nicole Blain denied harming the baby, but she was found guilty. The judge murder carries a mandatory life sentence. Normally, the person's sentenced there and then, but the judge has asked, I think, for some reports. What the judge will do is, as well as issuing the life sentence, is set a tariff. So that's the minimum term you must serve before you even be considered for parole. Had she pled guilty, then it would have been a lesser sentence in terms of the tariff. It's still been a life sentence, but all options are open to the judge. And I would imagine that when she is sentenced, the actual tariff, the term she must serve, the punishment part of the sentence will be quite substantial.
Yeah, of course. And looking at that, pleading guilty wasn't a table for her. That's what she's went and gone the direction she wanted to. But a particularly disturbing detail of this was Blain's social media presence following the death of Thea. Some saw it as attention seeking, some saw it as playing a part.
Yeah, this has emerged, following the conviction, we're able to report these things, that she seemed to be very active on social media, both before the birth of her daughter and afterwards, after the death of her daughter. And some of the video footage which we've seen was a kind of baby reveal party. She was, I think there was reported the fact that she seemed quite aggressive at the party. She seemed to be annoyed. There was some photographs of a kind of attempting to kind of stab a balloon. She's then seen storming off, but not before. She stuck her middle finger up at the camera. It didn't seem to be particularly pleasant. And then more afterwards, there was a series of disturbing social media videos in which she ranted about missing her daughter, told police to stop discussing her death. Seemed a lot of attention seeking. She had various rants. She hit out others discussing the death publicly, saying she should be the one to address any questions. So it seemed to be, somebody who there was stuff appeared on videos appeared on TikTok. So after the death of her daughter, she seemed quite happy to post these these videos on social media and talk quite openly about the case.
Yeah, and obviously looking at the details of the case, I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers will be keeping an eye on the eventual outcome once it comes.
Yeah, I mean, another thing she said was she described the death of her baby as an unexpected tragedy, which, that's, I mean, you could say about anything, it's it's more than a tragedy, it's a horrific.
Personally, when you look at the hindsight and what we know now, very disturbing to see that those lengths were gone to try and cover our tracks.
Yeah, at the time she was under the investigation by the police, it was a horrific crime. It was more than a tragedy. It was the death was terrible injuries that the baby had suffered. I think most people would keep a low profile, but she'd be quite happy to share her thoughts and on the incident and discuss the incident, with the public and the social media.
Yeah, of course, and of course we hope that that's a very painful situation can come to justice. Moving to our final topic, you've been writing for the last few weeks about a series of unsolved gangland murders. One at the weekend involved the double murders of John Hall and David McIntosh. It's the 25th anniversary of that crime. Are police any nearer to solving this?
Yeah, this has been running for the last 6 weeks or so, looking at the unsolved gangland murders, because they traditionally are the hardest ones to solve. For example, members of the criminal community are not known for cooperating with the police. They don't come forward. They don't give information. Members of the public can be quite often reluctant to get involved. Sometimes the view's taken that those who live by the sword die by the sword. It's criminal on criminal. People don't want to get involved. People are obviously apprehensive. If they do get involved, there could be repercussions or retributions. So generally, police often find that when they do have a murder involving a gangland figure, then there's very little information coming forward. It's slightly more different now with the more recent events because you've got things like CCTV, proliferation CCTV, mobile phone triangulation, which you can track people's movements through their phones and use of digital devices like laptops. But a lot of these cases that we've looked at are more historical. They kind of predate the sort of CCTV that we've now got, and obviously smartphones which track your movements. So we've actually looked at two situations. One, as you mentioned, there was the murders of John Hall and David McIntosh. They were found, they'd been shot dead. Their bodies were dumped in a kind of disused scrapyard in Lark Hall. They were found by a couple of people out walking, passers-by. They both been shot dead. The car, the car they'd been travelling in, been set on fire. The previous night, they'd been at a greyhound race meeting down in Gretna. They said goodbye to their families, and effectively they're found dead the following afternoon, suggesting they'd probably been killed the previous evening, lured to some sort of meeting. It's one of these crimes that nobody really is quite sure what the motive was. The suggestion was that both John Hall and David McIntosh had ran up quite a substantial drugs debt to a major organised crime figure from the Paisley area, which we can't name for legal reasons. The debt was for cocaine. It's about £120,000. The cocaine, understand, had been seized, but obviously they were then unable to pay for it. The story was that they'd given the cocaine to an associate who'd stored it in a locker at his work, had then been recovered by the police. So the two men didn't have their cocaine, and they didn't have the means to pay it. And the suggestion is that the person to whom they owed money had given up. He'd waited 10 months for it. He'd lost patience. And in the world of organised crime, the one thing you can't run up is debt. It doesn't really matter the size of the debt. The person who's sold them the drugs, he's got his reputation to think of. If he's seen as an easy touch that can be bumped for money, then other people are going to do that. So that seems to be the suggestion. They'd taken this cocaine on credit. There were probably a couple of small time dealers trying to move up the ladder, but it cost them their lives. The other one we looked at was, again, a similar sort of type of case. The John Hall, David McIntosh one was from October 2001. The following year, in fact, a year later, this is a guy, Billy Sibbald. He's a publican in Edinburgh. He runs a bar in the Portobello area. He used to run a sauna called the Orchard House in the Newtown area. He leaves his wife. They live in the Joppa area of Edinburgh. He goes to a meeting on the Tuesday night, summoned to a meeting, says goodbye to his wife, kisses her on the cheek, see you later, and then never returns home. His body is found about 3 months later in January 2003, just on the outskirts of Edinburgh, near a sort of mining village called New Craig Hall. He's been he's been stabbed. Most of his clothing's missing. Quite a lot of valuables that he had on his person, they're missing as well. Again, it was one of these ones like the John Hall, David McIntosh. Police hit a bit of a wall of silence that remains unsolved to this day. Again, in this way, there's numerous theories abound. Again, the main one seemed to be some unpaid drugs debt, suggestion he was owed £100,000 on drugs. And that the person who sold the drugs was basically calling in the debt. He's maybe gone to that meeting thinking the debt could be resolved. That doesn't appear to be the case. But there was also suggestions that his murder could have been linked to his previous business interests in this sauna. At that time, there was a lot of kind of Eastern European elements moving into the sauna trade, often with girls trafficked from Eastern Europe. And it even been suggested that the Russian mafia were involved, that he owed money to them over girls that had been supplied to him that he hadn't paid for. So again, a real whodunit. And I wonder whether the police acknowledged at the time and even now that there wasn't a lot of information coming forward from the public. And again, highlights how difficult these cases are to solve.
Yeah, and it also highlights how they'll be wanting to get on the gangland crimes that we're seeing just now as fast as they can, using modern technology they now have to tackle that.
We're seeing the modern technology, the EncroChat, where they've basically accessed text messages and other sort of messaging, and we've got the CCTV, we've got the mobile phones, we've got the laptops, the digital devices that are used where you can track people's activities. We didn't really have that then, didn't have the smartphones. Mobile phone usage was just taking off. It was starting to get widespread, but the early mobile phones were harder to trace. There wasn't the CCTV we have now. We've got, police wearing body cams. We've got CCTV in every corner. We've got doorbell cameras. We've got the cameras in cars and what have you. But that didn't exist then, and that's part of the reason that people commit these crimes under sort of cover of darkness, literally. But now with the sort of modern technology and sophistication and surveillance society, often there's really nowhere to hide now.
Yeah, well, hopefully, maybe one day modern technology can help solve these unsolved murders and bring some comfort to the families.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that Billy Sibbald was a father of three. His family, including his wife, have done a number of appeals over the years for information. Both John Hall, David McIntosh had partners. John Hall, I think, had a couple of kids. Though these guys are involved or get linked to organised crime, they have other lives as well, and they have grieving families that are left behind, looking for answers.
Of course, and there's always innocence behind every crime, regardless from what side. But yeah, that brings us to the end of our criminal record. Thank you, Norman, for joining us.
Thank you
thanks
very much
to our audience for tuning in to Criminal Records. If you have a question for the team, you can email reporters@dailyrecord.co.uk with the subject line Criminal Records. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can subscribe to listen to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts by searching for Criminal Records, or you can watch each week on our YouTube channel. Thank you.